Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Last week, Premier David Eby and the BC NDP announced a plan to help middle-income households purchase their first home by having the province finance 40% of the home purchase price. This will lower down payment requirements and lower mortgage payments for first-time home buyers, since the buyer only has to finance 60% of the home's purchase price with their bank. The first-time buyers would basically co-own their property with the province for 25 years or until they sell the property. Then at that point, the buyers would have to repay the province the 40% with interest, including 40% of the home's appreciation. Will this help make housing more affordable in BC? Here to discuss is the director of Simon Fraser University's City program, the Duke of Data and noted BC Supreme Court housing expert, Andy Yan. And this conversation is supported by Shelter Point Single Malt Whiskey, distinctly Vancouver Island, uniquely Shelter Point. So Andy, what do you make of Premier David Eby's plan for this kind of co-ownership for first-time home buyers to help them get into the market? They only have to finance 60% of the home. It seems like a good deal, right? It lowers the down payment requirements. It lowers the mortgage payments.
Well, I think it's one of those plans that really come under the best of intentions. But then the question is, how do you deal with the devil's in the details?
Okay.
I think that it really comes into how this is going to be implemented and who is this intended to, and also where might it have the biggest effect. There are, I think, these
middle-income families. Well, that's what Premier Eby said.
And I think middle-income families, it's how you define them, and yet also understanding within middle-income families, there are also these vast capacities within middle-income families that you have to understand that one of the biggest challenges is that are you really helping renters become homeowners, but yet also knowing that are you helping the children of homeowners become homeowners? That there is, there is this actual question of whom they're trying to help with this program, that I think that this becomes a subsidy for those who already have, as opposed to those who struggle to enter in a level of security of tenure for housing.
So were there any safeguards against getting money from other sources? Like, let's say a first-time home buyer has their parents basically give them 60% of the home price, and then the other 40% is financed through the province. So basically they have no mortgage.
Well, that's exactly it, is the issue of wealth. And while we're able to kind of really have great measurements of wealth, of income, it's actually coming into a big issue of how do you disclose wealth, much less the wealth of your parents. Do you have an overall household and yet a kind of promise that this is really how much you're earning? That this is really, I think, one of the kind of key questions towards income verification. And it's not only about income verification, it's wealth and asset verification. We've seen these kind of challenges with previous programs. You think about the Vivid at the Yates project in Victoria that actually found that almost had 10% of those units that were intended to be affordable home ownership being abused by people who own multiple units, that people who never lived in them. That I think that it's important to understand that these types of affordable home owner programs, while again being in the best of all intentions, really have ongoing challenges towards implementation, transparency, and also accountability.
Now, Premier Christy Clark, when she was premier, had a very similar program where the province would basically give you a 5% loan and there was no interest on it. And I remember at the time, David Eby was very critical. He said, oh my God, you're taking on more debt. This is not the solution. And now Premier Eby has the province offering 40% of the home purchase price. Do you think he realized that debt isn't a big deal, or do you think 2017 Premier Eby was correct that taking on more debt is a big deal?
I think that it goes into actually a larger generational problem. It becomes that how that you, me, and everyone younger than us are parts of a generation debt. And actually the problems of actually the long-term issues of that debt, because when things change, like, a pandemic and interest rate changes, that actually creates a sense of precarity. It also creates a vulnerability that I think overall, it's actually a larger problem, not only within the province, but within the federal realm, that there's this idea that deeper and longer debt equals affordability. And I think that that is actually one that sets out certain households, particularly towards a level of vulnerability, particularly around interest rates.
Now, how many first-time home buyers does BC have in any given year? Because I know that this program that the BC NDP have proposed will only be limited to 5,000 first-time home buyers per year, 25 5,000 in total. Right. Is that going to cover all the people that want to get into the housing market?
Well, that's the interesting question, is that at least based upon the latest Stats Can data, which is from 2018 to 2021, on an average year, it looks at around 20,000-ish first-time home buyers on any given year. But that ranges drastically between 2018, which had about 18,000 first-time homeowners in the province of British Columbia, to 2021, which is then we hit in 38,000.
In a low interest environment.
In a very ultra low interest, almost in a no interest environment.
Right.
And I heard something happened during that time. And I don't know what,
something about a pandemic or something.
Cough or something. Like it wasn't. And I think that actually really shows you the power of finance, right? And it's how housing policy is really a combination of supply, demand, and finance measures, through which this is, of course, an example of a finance measure. But then is it a finance measure that's directed to a population that is struggling to enter home ownership or would otherwise enter home ownership anyways, but now has this great vehicle on government money, on getting the house to support your bet.
But presumably there's a much larger pool of people wanting to enter the home ownership market rather than people who are on the precipice or are very close to entering the market, right? So when you limit it to 5,000 spots for this program, it feels like you should probably be friends with the Premier, or at least whoever is administering the program, right?
Well, I don't know about that, but then it's the issue of 5,000 spots, but where? Because 5,000 spots in the city of Vancouver is a lot different than 5,000 spots in Surrey, which is a lot different than 5,000 spots in, well, there is close enough, 5,000 spots in Williams Lake.
Right.
And I think that.
So how do you even cost this program?
I don't know. I mean, this is actually part of the details, and I think that this is for all the parties. Is that they've come out with these, promises on these platforms, and then it's like, what about the details? Where's the homework? Where are the examples? What do you really have in terms of implementation, of monitoring, of really changing course in case something happens that you don't intend to?
We got 30 seconds left. This is a multi-billion-dollar program. Where do you think the money would be better spent in terms of housing affordability?
I think that it would be better spent in terms of looking at developing doing non-market housing, looking at developing a stock of non-market housing for those who cannot enter the housing market and also face housing precarity.
That's it.
That's it.
You should be advising the Premier. Andy Yan, what a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
A great pleasure, Mo. Take care.
Folks, that was the Duke of Data and a planner of cities, Andy Yan. Big thank you to Shelter Point Single Malt Whiskey for supporting local conversations about local concerns. Now, after some business, if you're a political candidate and you say something wild or offensive, what should you do? We'll talk about it up next.